A man's fertility plays 50% of the role in conception and staying pregnant. Yes, sperm issues can affect miscarriage too. Yet there is so little support out there on how to evaluate male fertility. This is why we recorded today's episode, which are the top 10 tips on testing male fertility. We dive into how to test and when, the semen analysis, testing hormones, other markers, and so much more. This is an episode every woman, couple, and man should listen to who wants to be a parent someday. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to Healthy as a Mother, the podcast for becoming and being a mother, with your co-hosts, Dr. Leah Gordon and Dr. Morgan McDermott, two naturopathic doctors who get it.
Each week, we teach you how to be the healthiest mother you can be, from fertility and preconception to pregnancy and birth prep, through postpartum and throughout motherhood, empowering you with the natural health guidance and education you're not getting elsewhere, so you can confidently navigate the broken system at large.
The real, the raw, the untalked about. And remember, this information is not intended to diagnose, treat, or manage any disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes. Having adequate levels of minerals and proper hydration are essential when balancing your hormones, optimizing your fertility, trying to conceive, or preparing for pregnancy. For Dr. Morgan and I, ingredient quality is of top concern, and that's why we love Relight Electrolyte Powders by Redmond's Real Salt. Relight contains Redmond's ancient, unrefined sea salt, which contains 60 plus trace minerals in and of itself. Relight powders conveniently contain the appropriate proportions and forms of calcium, potassium, chloride, and even 2 forms of magnesium, malate and glycinate. These are essential for hormone balance, energy production, and overall wellness. The best part is they taste delicious and they have so many fun flavors. My personal favorite is lemon lime, but I know Dr. Morgan loves their strawberry lemonade. Visit redmond.life and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 15% off any of Redmond's products, from their electrolytes to their OG sea salt, other seasoning salts, natural toothpaste, and bentonite clays. Again, visit redmond.life and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 15%. Here's to happy hydrating along your womanhood and fertility journey.
Okay, we're back at it talking about male fertility, and this is just so important because it really does take 2 to make a baby here, and for all of history, of course, nobody's surprised by this. It was only ever put on the woman. And so now we know it's actually, unfortunately, going to probably increasingly over time be more and more the man's side of this equation that is not producing a successful embryo and baby and conceptus. And so you are the expert on this. Thank goodness you are. And you have really good job security, unfortunately, because
I know.
it's just only becoming more and more of a problem. Sperm are just very fragile, and there are so many toxins and things happening in our world and in our modern living, in our environment. And it's something that is going to just become routine when a couple, at least you and I wish and hope that it'll become routine, where it's like a couple gets together, they're planning their life together and they're wanting to have children. And it's like, this is just going to be hopefully something that is in the future, something that everybody does so that they are being proactive. And also it's such a marker of health, right? In general, it's just like we call menstrual cycles the 6th vital sign. It's like, or 5th vital sign, 5th, 6th. What am I saying?
5th, but we could add a 5th one and I get a 6th. Sperm is the 6th vital sign.
Yeah, there you go.
That should be my book title, 6th vital sign.
And so it's important though. It's like, why, what's going on here? And so anyway, today you're going to walk us through top tips here, the things that you wish that everybody could know when it comes to testing male fertility. And then, we'll link in the show notes to other related episodes about what to do about it. If your sperm results come back negative or, bad, whatever you need to work on them. But today, please just walk us through with all your knowledge and what you know. And as you've worked with different patients in the past, this would be sort of like the top 10 things that you wish every couple could know specifically about the testing portion of your male fertility journey.
Yes. And this isn't one of my top tips, but if I could change our culture to where the wedding night of all of the people who get together, they get gifted a sperm test.
There you go.
That would be my contribution to the world.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I love you. Happy wedding. Here, go ejaculate in this cup and let's see what's going on. Yeah. Or maybe even like after, like he gives her an engagement ring and she gives him a sperm test.
A sperm analysis.
That's
there you go.
Like what I would love.
Exactly.
So that's my first tip though, actually, is you must test sperm as soon as possible. This is basic, so obvious, and no one does it. There's no harm to testing sperm. It is super easy to do. You don't even have to go to a doctor to have it done. There are direct-to-consumer labs that do it. Legacy is one of my favorites, givelegacy.com. And you can use code Dr. Leah and save like 15% on that. But basically, there's no harm. All you have to do is spend a little bit of money, and it gives you so much data, and you should do it as soon as possible. I mean, even if you want kids in 10 years, to just see what's going on, because if you test and things look great, awesome. And if you test and things don't look great, then you have ample time to do something about it. And sometimes, like in my husband's case, there is literally no way to know. He is perfectly normal in every way anatomically. He is actually exceptional in many ways anatomically. He's like great in his physiology. Like there were no signs at all that he had a sperm issue. So I can't highlight that enough, that test your sperm ASAP, whether you're listening to this or you're a female listening to this and you have a boyfriend or a fiance or a husband or a partner, whatever, do it.
And how much does it cost ish, the legacy test? Just so we have an idea. Is it like 125 or 150?
No, I think it's more now. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might be in the 200s, but
Okay.
honestly, it's totally worth it. It's just a bummer because insurance isn't going to cover a sperm test until you've been trying for over a year. So it's like, okay, prioritize your budget, save for a little bit, or ask for it as a wedding gift. I don't know. Because otherwise you have to wait an entire 12 months of trying before.
How do they know that you've been doing that? I mean, I'm not to say that we should lie, but how do they know?
That's a good question.
You just could say, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Like,
I'm not
we
saying
have
that
been trying. No, I love the way you're thinking. My like non-rule breaking self is like, wow, I would never think that, but that's true. I don't know how they would know. It probably has to be documented that like you went to the doctor. I don't know though.
See, now that's rude because people maybe like wouldn't have gone to the doctor.
But maybe not. Maybe they just go off their own knowledge.
At the end of the day, $200 is way less than the $40,000 to $50,000 that IVF would cost. So let's just, kind of try to keep things in perspective, that if we are working on, this is honestly like low hanging fruit. It's so easy to change sperm. It's not so easy, but it's easier sometimes than say like a really, really stubborn PCOS case or something like that.
Yeah. 2 dinners out, save 2 date night, amounts of money. And that's your sperm analysis in today's world, unfortunately. But anyway, so that's number 1. Number 2 is, if you're going to do a semen analysis, a man needs to be abstinent for at least 3 days prior. And abstinent means no ejaculation. So that's no sex and no masturbation. So if you have a partner or you yourself are listening to this and that's like something you do every day, like you need to be aware of that, because we want to have 3 days of letting that build up and see what's going on. It can
That's a really
change.
good point.
Yeah, it can change the count, especially if your count is on the lower side. If you had just ejaculated, like let's say you had sex the night before and then the next day you do the test, it might not be as accurate. So that's another thing that a lot of men don't realize. And when you do these at-home tests, obviously you can do it at home. If you go to a doctor, typically you're going to have to do it at home and then like immediately drive it to the clinic, or you have to do it at the clinic. So there are some advantages to doing the direct-to-consumer path.
Okay, question for you though about that. Do you think that the kind of conventional route, lab-based sperm analyses are of similar quality or information? It's kind of, or is it sort of like getting a parasite ova and parasite test, and you're like, that's not what I was expecting when I told you to go get a stool analysis. That's not what I mean by stool analysis, but that's what conventional world thinks. Like, is the sperm analysis the same or better or worse?
It depends on the clinic you go to, but a lot of times I have seen with patients and clients in my programs that just like the routine conventional doctor semen analysis is very bare bones and is not very comprehensive. Okay. Like, for example, there's someone in my program right now and they're like, they only tested count, motility, and morphology, and you need a lot more, which actually segues me into one of my tips. So I'll just go there. Is when you want to test your sperm, you need to choose a comprehensive semen analysis. If you're going to do the effort and pay the money, make sure that what it's being tested is much more than just count, which is how much sperm you have, morphology, which is the shape of the sperm, what it looks like, and motility, which is how it swims. There are a lot of other clues that we can get from a semen analysis that can tell us if something's going on. Things like volume, how much semen. Like if you do a semen analysis and you have a really low volume, that tells us immediately that there's a blockage somewhere. And if you have a pH issue, let's say you check your pH, which is the acidity or the alkalinity of the semen. Let's say it's really acidic. First of all, that could be killing all your sperm and make you infertile, but it can indicate that you have an infection or that there's a blockage or that there's some other issue. And these things aren't going to show up. Viscosity. So viscosity is how thick the semen is. And if it's super thick, that could mean that you have like sperm antibodies or some other thing going on that is separate from the sperm's like count, morphology, and motility. So you want to choose the most comprehensive test that you can. And a lot of conventional tests are the bare minimum as they are in every situation. So if you are going to a conventional doctor, ask to be like, what is on the test before you do it? Or, just choose one of these more direct to consumer labs. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 is any change a man makes in his life is not going to show up in his semen analysis for 3 months, because that's how long it takes the sperm to be made in the little testicles and stored in the epididymis and then ejaculated. And so if you're like, you know what, we just got married and we're going to go on our honeymoon and have a lot of fun, and then we're going to stop drinking, for a month and then test his sperm to see what's going on. Like, no, his sperm is going to be what happened the month before you got married,
Yeah.
So whatever change he makes, whether that's dietary, lifestyle, supplements, whatever, you need to wait minimum 72 days, but really 90 would be ideal to see.
Oh, 72 days. Okay, for some reason I thought you were going to say 72 hours. I was like, no. Wait a minute.
No,
what?
72. Okay. Technically, like the life cycle of a sperm is 72 days, but it can be up to 90. So that's why we say 3 months, and it's just a lot easier. And personally, I like to give the body a little bit more time to see and realize those changes. So that could be whether you're doing it for the first time, because a lot of people I like run into people who I see as patients or clients. I don't like run into them and they tell me about when they tested their sperm. This man I ran into on the street. They will do things like that. They're like, well, we just did like a detox. He didn't drink for a month. He was like being really mindful. And then we tested his sperm. And I'm like, oh, I wish he would have done it for 3 months or waited 3 months, So
Yes.
it takes that long.
Okay, so let me just like recap that for people. If you decide, okay, we want to start trying for a baby soonish, and you're like, well, let's order a sperm analysis. Okay, so you do your legacy test or whatever it is, you get your results, you need to tweak some things. You're going to put him on a protocol. He's going to do those things for 3 months before we are expecting to see change. Now, you may get pregnant in that time period if you're trying, but if you're looking for the improvements, it must be at least 3 months before you're going to spend the money to then retest, because otherwise it's a waste. It's just, you're just not going to see the changes yet, because it literally one individual sperm takes 3 months to mature. One sperm cell will, so then you can see this, right? Like you're not going to affect any change in those cells until that whole, like, they all have to be gone and ejaculated is gone.
Exactly.
And then we can resume and we can see what's going on now with these new guys. So just have that as be part of your planning. And this is kind of our whole gripe. And this is why we always want to be bringing up preconception and the months before you want to have a baby and being prepared for having a baby. And this is your whole situation with your course, the fertility formula too. Yes, you can help women, families who have been having a struggle with trying to conceive already, but it's also for the people who are wanting to do really good, robust preconception care so that you're not going to run into fertility issues potentially, but also so that you and your partner and your baby can be the healthiest as possible. And so this is where it really, really matters. If we had to give a bare minimum before you get pregnant that you're working on factors, it would be 3 months, but ideally it's like 6 months, 9 months that you are working on your body before you're going to even like give the chance of that, of a baby being conceived. Now it happens. It is what it is. But just, that's like, I just kind of wanted to wrap that up. And then, in the situation of like, same-sex couples that are going through IUI or something like that, like lesbian couples, they're not going to be able to affect change in the quality of the
Right.
sperm, but it's been tested in those labs when they're going to a sperm bank,
Yeah.
anything like that. So this is, it's mostly a heterosexual topic and conversation here, but anytime
Yeah.
that there is a chance that we can be improving sperm in any kind of a way, or maybe if you're seeking like surrogacy as a gay couple man, you're going to use one of the sperm. Same applies. Like
Yeah.
this is any whatever the cells are that are making this baby need to be in the healthiest state possible.
Yeah.
So I just want
And for sperm donation, you have to meet like certain criteria. They're not super strict though, where they're like, this man hasn't drank alcohol for 3 months ahead of
yeah.
time. But they do have to be like somewhat healthy-ish, or at least their numbers look good. And it's actually interesting because more and more sperm donation areas are having a hard time finding healthy enough sperm, which is really
Wow. Gosh, you guys,
crazy.
this is
I
like, what's
know.
that movie where there's like only one pregnant
The
person?
Handmaid's Tale,
Or
that
yeah,
one,
Handmaid's
or
Tale. But then there was one that when we were kids, it was like,
there's one pregnant person. Oh my
there's like
God.
one pregnant person left on the planet and they're like trying to protect her. And then there's like the bad guys are trying to come
Oh
and get her.
no,
What's that called?
I don't know. I
Like
never saw
Last Man
that.
on Earth?
What's
I don't
that
know,
called?
something. I don't know.
Wow, I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, especially, I never saw The Handmaid's Tale in its entirety. So I can't speak to this at all. And anyone watching is probably like, what? But I was, I've only seen like 2 episodes and I was like, oh my God, it's totally a male issue. You know, they blame it on the women and everything. And I'm like, I bet the men have no sperm.
Yes.
But I
Okay.
don't know
Oh,
if that's actually what happened.
it's called Children of Men. That's
Oh,
what it is. It's
sounds
about,
terrible.
it says the little like blurb here about it is that it says in 2027. Okay, that's
Dude.
the movie came out in 2006, but this is what it says: in 2027, in a chaotic world in which women have somehow become infertile. That's not how it's going to go, though. It's going to go with men. But either way,
Yeah.
a former activist agrees to help transport a miraculously pregnant woman to a sanctuary at
Whoa.
sea. So yeah, you might want
Oh
to
my
watch it.
gosh.
I've seen it before. I can't remember, but either
Okay,
way,
I'll
yeah,
definitely have to watch that.
Handmaid's Tale, I tried to watch the one episode. I think it's maybe like the first one, and it it like plagued me. I didn't even finish the episode. I couldn't
Yeah.
even watch it. I was like, it was the one where she's giving birth into the hands of like a different woman, and
Mhm.
I was like,
Yeah, it's super dark.
whoa! It
I only watched
was.
a few episodes too, and I was like, this is just too
And she
close
was
to home.
acting like
And
she was the one that was giving birth. The whole thing was completely. I was just like, no, no, no,
yeah,
nope, 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 nope.
yep.
I don't. No,
I
nope,
know.
no.
Super weird, but that's what everyone brings up. So I haven't seen it in its entirety, but when I like post on TikTok or whatever, of course, it's the TikTok community. When I talk about, the dire predictions of male fertility, they're always like, this is Handmaid's Tale coming to life. So I'm like, I don't know if that actually came true, that it was the men. They never would have done it because it was like a super patriarchal society. But anyways,
Yeah.
all of that is to say the rate of male fertility is declining sharply. It has
Yes.
dropped 50% in the last few decades. It's really alarming. But for anyone listening to this to be like, well, why do I even want to test my sperm? Why does it even matter? It's not only fertility that's declining, but it's also we can make such an impact on the health of our children. We also have a health epidemic in our kiddos. And a lot of that has to do with the health of the people who are having children. So if you can change your health before you have kids, that's that preconception time, it can greatly influence their life. And males in particular, we can study them so much better and we can see how easy things affect the sperm, both negatively and positively. But also, we can study the epigenetics, which is when a man has a certain health profile before pregnancy, how that then impacts the health of his children,
Mm-hmm.
not only when they're kids, but when they're adults.
Mm.
And we have enough data now to see that the health of a man before pregnancy impacts his children's risk for asthma, cardiovascular disease, cancer, gut issues, like all of this stuff based on how healthy his sperm was, which is super mind blowing. So it's
No
important
pressure.
no pressure. It's important. It's not like you have to be perfect, but this stuff's important. And so when we test, it gives us a window. It's not just like, oh, my numbers didn't come back good. It's like the repercussions of that, of having unhealthy sperm, impact more than just, your numbers. So it's hopefully motivating. We have a whole episode on what to do about it. I have a whole course on it. It's also in my fertility formula of how to actually make change. But if we get back to the tips on testing.
Yes.
When you do a semen analysis, a part of the semen analysis is obviously looking at sperm, right? Semen is the fluid that is ejaculated. It has more than sperm in it. That's, it has fluids from the prostate
Prostate.
and the bulbourethral glands and all of this stuff. But the sperm itself, you do look at the count, which is how much is there. And the counts of sperm have been declining sharply. And the normal ranges for what is considered normal and healthy also keep dropping. So the alarming state of how many men would be considered infertile is actually less than it should be, because they just keep changing the normal to be less and less, so it doesn't look as alarming. But that's a problem. I have a free guide that tells you all the different markers in the semen analysis and what's optimal and everything like that. It used to be a man was considered to have a subfertility issue when the count was less than 20 million. Yet the WHO moved that to be less than 15. So now men less than 15 are considered normal, which is just crazy, because a healthy man with good testosterone who's super healthy should have 100 to 200 million sperm in an
Whoa.
ejaculate. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know it was that high. That's really
Yeah.
high.
Yeah. I mean, that's what used to be and what should be normal. It is very not normal now, but that is what we see. I see that, in patients a lot. But the thing to know is if you fall anywhere between that like 10 million to 20 million range, I would consider that suboptimal. And I'm thinking more lifestyle stuff, toxins, your diet, whatever. If it's less than 10 million, but especially if it's less than 5 million, you immediately need to think, do I have a blockage? Do I have a varicocele? Do I have a genetic issue? Because I see men will test their sperm and it's like less than 5 million. Let's say it's 4 million. I know that sounds like so much. Think of it as like 4. Like I have 4 sperm versus like 10 sperm, because the millions doesn't matter. It's like that less than 5 million is such a small amount in the fertility world. And that's a huge red flag to me that there is something blocking this sperm, whether you genetically aren't making it well or there is something blocking it from getting out.
Okay, so you said varicocele. I just want to define that for people that don't know.
Yeah. So varicocele is a common thing that happens. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 30 to 40% of men have them. So it's quite common. And it's dilation of the veins in the testicles. So if the veins get kind of swollen and dilated, they're like big and
like
fluffy.
A varicose vein.
Yep, like a varicose vein. That's exactly what's happening. But in the testicles, it can cause a bunch of fertility issues. One, because it increases heat. There's more blood there, so it's hot, and sperm don't like heat. Two is it doesn't do a good job of getting fresh blood to the testicles, so they're not getting nutrients and all of the things that they need. And it doesn't shunt the bad blood away. So they're just sitting in this hot, toxic soup, basically. And the sperm don't like that. And it's one very common cause of male fertility issues. And so if there is any issue on a semen analysis, whether it's count, quality, morphology or motility, it definitely is something that needs to be worked up by a male urologist who can do a physical exam on you to see, do I have a varicocele? And some are more mild than others. And they're very common, unfortunately, in men who work out. So it's like you think that you're doing like this healthy thing. Maybe you've like weight trained your whole life, or you go to the gym or you lift heavy things because you're a lumberjack and you chop wood or whatever. Like, you don't even, yeah, you don't even have to go to the gym. Like if anytime you're straining, right, that like that strain of like lifting something heavy can cause those varicose veins to happen. So it's unfortunately very common in men who also are like more masculine, because maybe they're masculine because they have more testosterone and that's driving them to exercise, or they have more testosterone because they're exercising. So it, like, a very common thing that I just see in the male fertility space are these like macho men who are like, nothing's wrong with me. I'm like this big burly man. I work out. Like, whatever, like there's surely nothing wrong with my fertility. And lo and behold, they're often the ones that have varicoceles, they have sperm problems. And it can also happen in men for different reasons, but that's very common and needs to be worked up and evaluated and ruled out. You can do surgery for that. However, surgery doesn't always fix it. It does in some men and sometimes not in other men, but that's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down. So that's that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So next consideration, number 6, is when you do a semen analysis, a classic semen analysis does not include something called DNA fragmentation. DNA fragmentation is a test that actually looks at the sperm itself to see if the DNA has been unraveled and damaged in some way. And this is another clue to a fertility problem, especially for someone who's maybe struggling with unexplained infertility, or if a man has done a semen analysis and it's sort of suboptimal, but it's not terrible. Even if the semen analysis is normal, there can still be DNA fragmentation issues that are leading to fertility struggles.
Okay, so wait a minute. So is DNA fragmentation something that the test will tell you, or no, it's a separate test?
It's a separate test.
Got it. Okay.
So something like legacy, you can add it on as a separate test.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, when we did a DNA fragmentation test along our journey, I don't think it was as common. And literally, Mike was shipped this container that looked like a time traveling machine from like the 1980s. I have a video of it. It was ginormous, like 3 feet. I'm not even kidding. This weird cylinder. And I don't even know what it was all about. It looked
Because
like
it
a
was like
bomb.
keeping it cold, like dry
I
ice.
guess. I don't know. I was like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It's not like that anymore, or at least there are other ways to test DNA fragmentation, because at the time I had never heard of it. It was like very weird and fringe and rare, and it's definitely being talked about more now. And we're just learning more and more that if a couple has unexplained infertility, or if they have recurrent losses, because we have to remember male fertility, the sperm health, it contributes to 50% of miscarriage. Miscarriage is not a female issue only, especially if there's no known thing found in the female, right? She doesn't have any clotting issues. There's no low progesterone. There's nothing obvious. We always want to look at the male's sperm.
Especially if it's in that first couple weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, because the health of that sperm, like let's say he has a highly fragmented sperm, it's just not going to make healthy embryos, and they're not going to survive. It means 50% of the DNA. An embryo is 50% of the female, 50% of the male. If the male side is faulty, you're not going to have a healthy embryo that has the together DNA. So the DNA fragmentation test might be something to consider to add on. It's not, I love data, obviously. If you're on a budget, it's not something you need to start with. I typically don't say people start with a DNA fragmentation test unless you have the resources to do so. But it might be something to consider if you do a semen analysis and some things look wonky, or if you have had a history of trying, it's not working, a history of loss, that kind of thing. Yep.
Wow.
So that's a fun thing to think about.
Super fun.
Are my sperm fragmented? Yeah. So the next consideration is the semen analysis is great, and that's the first line of testing that I always recommend. However, I think it's also wise for a man to do a full blood workup. And I always recommend a full blood workup in females, which looks at hormones and inflammatory markers and metabolic markers and all of these different things that impact fertility, because we have to remember that fertility is a side effect of optimal health. So there's a lot of things that affect our fertility, because if our health is not optimal, it's kind of one of the first things that goes. And for a man, it's the same. We both are, reproductive contributors, and our health impacts us, whether we're male or female. So in testing a man, I have a whole list again of labs to test inside of my programs and some of my freebies. But you want to test hormones in him like testosterone. That's the most important one, because this is the hormone that makes sperm. And FSH and LH are two hormones that come from the brain. We have the same hormones in females. They're the ones that control ovulation. In a man, they control testosterone production. LH contributes to testosterone production. So it comes from the brain, goes to the testicles and says, make testosterone. And FSH comes from the brain and goes to the testicles and says, make sperm. So all three of those are very important and need to be in range. And if they're not, they can give clues as to what's going on with a male's fertility. Other important things are like the thyroid hormone. Thyroid is important in females and males. They need to have healthy thyroid too to make sperm. And then some other things that aren't common, these are not going to be tested by a conventional doctor at all, but should be, are things like homocysteine. This can tell us if a man is not methylating well, which is basically an activation of sorts of different things in the body. And high homocysteine is a sign that there could be something going on with his fertility. And metabolic markers actually impact male fertility a lot. So fasting glucose, fasting insulin, if these are high, they can indicate diabetes. These can absolutely impact sperm. And then inflammation. So things like HSCRP is a classic inflammatory marker. There's more, but these are the most common, or like the things that I would say if you had to pick. There's vitamin D and like all these other things. So I have the full list in my programs, but it's more than just testosterone, right?
Yes. And I will put the links to the semen analysis freebie and your male fertility freebie into the show notes. So you guys can check those out.
Perfect. And then speaking of testosterone is a very important hormone for men. This is the
number 8.
Yes,
now.
number 8. We are on tip number 8 of 10. So total testosterone is important. Free testosterone is what is actually free to do the work in the body. But a lot of times we just look at total testosterone as like an overarching first pass of, okay, what's going on with this guy? And just like the semen results, they keep moving the normal range lower and lower. So a man's total testosterone today could be 325, and he will be told by his doctor, you have normal testosterone.
No.
And that is absolute bullshit.
That is nuts.
I know. They moved the range to be greater, or if it's greater than 300, you're normal. And that is not true.
Whoa.
In our world, it needs to be at least 600. Ideally, a man's like optimal testosterone is between like 650 and 850 sort of. But to me, I'm like, if you're at least around 600, you're doing really good. When I see a man, which this is so sad, you guys, when I see a young man, I say young as in like 20s or 30s, who has a testosterone around 600, I'm like, oh my gosh, good for you. Like, what are you doing? Like, You are in the top echelon of like all the men in the world these days. And that's sad.
Yeah.
Because that would have been considered low just a couple decades ago. But I think, around the 600s is great. It is very, very common for men to be in the 300s or even to be under 300. But the thing about fertility is if a man's total testosterone is in the 3 to 600 range, it can greatly impact their sperm. Because that's not actually normal. That's not what should be happening in a normal, healthy, physiological male.
Okay, so if we get a testosterone result back that's, say, it's like 400, it's not great at all. But the semen analysis says all the numbers on the semen analysis are like actually okay. We're just moving forward with that as it's okay.
Yep. I mean, it's okay. It's, we do the best we can. There's always room for improvement. The thing about male fertility is there are so many things and factors at play. It's sometimes impossible to move that line. Like I wouldn't tell a couple, we need to wait until his testosterone is in the 600s before you try to conceive. No. It's totally fine. I'm just saying if you do a semen analysis and something's off, like the count or something, and you test testosterone and it's, 300-400s or definitely below that, then we might need to be like, okay, we need to boost testosterone to improve sperm. If the semen analysis looks good, especially if you do a DNA fragmentation, it looks good, and his testosterone is, 350 to 450, whatever. He's not going to probably feel great for the rest of his life, but they'll probably be able to conceive, or at least that isn't maybe like the main factor. But most men, like libido, energy, drive, motivation outside of fertility, they're going to feel better with a higher testosterone. But sometimes it's impossible to get up naturally. So yeah, we take it all into consideration, right? The semen analysis, the testosterone, that kind of thing. It's just sometimes people will have a bad semen analysis and their testosterone's like 350 and they're like, my doctor said everything's normal.
Yeah.
I don't understand. And it's like, well, I mean, it's not really normal. So let's work on it.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. Men are often forgotten about or neglected when it comes to fertility, which is insane given the fact that they contribute 50% to making a baby. Male factor also accounts for almost 50% of infertility cases. So why aren't we talking about and supporting men more? At Needed, they are. Because our infertility was male factor, this is super near and dear to my heart, and I'm so proud of the products that I helped formulate with Needed specifically for men. One of my favorite products is their Sperm Support Plus, which is an amazing blend of herbs and nutrients to support optimal testosterone and sperm production, antioxidants to support sperm quality, and probiotics for an optimal microbiome, which supports health in general. This blend is not only good for fertility, but for men's health, because what is good for fertility is good for everything else, from mood to libido to energy. It was designed to be taken in combo with Needed's Men's Multi, their omega-3s, and their CoQ10. Visit thisisneeded.com and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 20% off your first order. Again, visit thisisneeded.com and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 20%. Okay, back to the show. Tip number 9. Okay, so count again is how many, morphology is the shape, what it looks like, and motility is how they swim, how they move. Or if any of those are off, or if DNA fragmentation is off, right? So if you do a DNA fragmentation and it's really high, meaning a lot of your sperm are damaged, you might want to consider more functional medicine testing. So we've talked about the semen analysis. That's first line. We've talked about DNA fragmentation. That's like an additional semen test to see what's going on. And we've talked about a blood panel to look at hormones and some of these other markers. But if you do a semen analysis and you're like, okay, I have really poor morphology or really bad motility, or my count is like 12 million, it's not like the 5 million or less, because that, again, I'm thinking blockage, genetic issue. Then you might want to do some more functional medicine testing. Some things to consider that affect sperm are toxins, first and foremost. So doing like a toxicity panel, you can do that through my website, through my programs, looking at environmental toxins, pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, glyphosate, like all of these things that we're exposed to, because it depends. People ask me all the time, do we need to do all this testing? And I'm not like a huge go test everything under the sun. That gets expensive. It's crazy. We have to be smart about it. But if you're wanting to optimize, and or you have the resources, and or you've been trying to conceive for a while, sometimes doing this kind of testing is really eye-opening, because it might give us a clue into something that we've been blindsided by. For example, I had a couple once who they were trying to conceive for a long time. They weren't able to conceive. And so we did a toxin test on him, and he had this really high level of a pesticide in his body. And, he's not a farmer. It was like, what is going on? Like, why do you, and it's a very known sperm damaging pesticide, atrazine. And we're just like, where is this coming from? So we do more in-depth investigation. What's going on with your water filter? They lived by a park or a golf course or something. So I'm like, maybe it's like leaching in from that. Like, we need to take better precautions to protect your water supply. Maybe it's coming from your coffee. He drinks coffee every day that's not organic. Like, maybe we change up the coffee. Like, we just get more savvy with looking at where his exposure could be coming from, because all of a sudden, we see this super high level that could be affecting him. So sometimes it can give us data into that. Or the other reason I say to test is if a man is not really on board, or he doesn't really understand, and he needs that data in front of him. If a woman's like, you should stop drinking your coffee out of your plastic hot cup, Or like, let's change your products. And he's like, no. I see that a lot of resistance in men. It's very common. And if he does a test and it's there in front of him, like, these are your levels, it's very motivating to some men who like data or who need to see like the evidence to make the change. So that's another reason sometimes why I recommend testing.
Okay.
So toxins are one. Mold, unfortunately, I hate mold. We have an episode coming out next season about mold with Dr. Leslie, which is going to be great. But that's another toxin that can affect sperm. Microbiome issues, so maybe testing gut microbiome and seeing if there's inflammatory markers or any metabolic issues coming from that. Sometimes men can have infections in their semen, which is crazy. This we see a lot if morphology is really poor and there's really not any other explanation. Or like I've had patients who had symptoms of UTI, but it was subtle, just like kind of peeing a lot, but not really. And it's just this like kind of low level grade irritation. Like that to me is a huge red flag. Or if you do a semen analysis and it shows high round cells or high red blood cell, or not red blood cells, white blood cells, which are a type of the immune system cells, these can all indicate that there could be an infection.
Like
And
what
there
kinds of
is,
things would that be? Like a gonorrhea, chlamydia, like a STD or like
I mean,
a
it could be STD, but it can also be subtle things like just like we get a dysbiosis in our gut, we can get a dysbiosis in our urinary tract. So you can test that. Microgen DX is a lab that I use where you do a urine and a semen sample and they will test the bacteria in there and see if there's anything that's really obvious. But yeah, a lot of men can have STDs and they're silent.
yeah,
Women have a lot more symptoms from stuff.
always.
Men, yeah, of course. Men can be silent carriers of STDs and infections all the time. They can actually be contributors to BV, bacterial vaginosis, in women. It's not technically categorized as an STD right now, but we see it all the time. Like a woman gets a new sexual partner and then she develops bacterial vaginosis, and it's like the men have microbiomes too. So it impacts it. So just little things to think about. Again, I have more information on all of this in my courses, but when people are like, well, something's wrong with my sperm, what do I do? And obviously there's a lot to do, but if you're trying to investigate more to figure out the root cause, that helps. And then my last tip, tip number 10, is more I actually asked my husband, or I was talking to him about something. I don't even remember. We were driving in the car the other day. For anyone who doesn't know, my husband has severe male factor infertility. He is the one that had varicoceles, bilateral varicoceles, blockages, high toxins, and a genetic issue that I think affects the ability for the sperm to get out of his body.
Honestly, like
So really,
amazing.
like everything. My
Yeah.
husband literally has everything except for low testosterone. His testosterone's naturally like really good. But I told him how attractive it was to me that he never had this like macho complex of like, there's nothing wrong with me, or like very shut down around the conversation about his fertility, or, got really defensive or angry. He just handled it so eloquently, in my opinion, in the sense where he's just like, this sucks. And, I always imagined having children. I've always wanted to be a father. I want to be able to make you a mother. And my body's not doing that. And I asked him sort of where he's coming from to have that approach, because I see it so much in patients and clients that men sort of shut down. They get really defensive. They feel really insecure, and, understandably so. But he basically said, I see my body as a vehicle, like a car. It is a vehicle that carries my soul around. It isn't me. So when I'm told that something's wrong with my body, that I don't have sperm or whatever, I don't take it personally like I'm a bad man, that I can't provide, that I'm not a good father, that there's something wrong with me. He saw it as his body, as something like he needed to help his body. His body's trying really hard, and it's just not working in the way that we wanted it to. And to not be mad at his body, just like you wouldn't be mad at a child. And how can we help and do whatever we need to do to like make that happen. And he didn't come to that like the first day that we like found out about his sperm. That took a long time. I think an ayahuasca journey and a lot of like self-reflection. But he got to that conclusion, and you know, he handled it all really well the whole time. But I remember when that clicked for him, where he's like, my body's doing the best it can, and I need to do the best I can for it to help it as much as possible so that we can get to this goal of starting a family and having this family together. And that I see my body as a vehicle and a vessel, like a car that needs repaired and needs support and needs surgery and needs healing and all of this. It is not me. And
That's awesome.
I just want to relay that to anyone who's listening, because a lot of men are resistant to doing fertility testing for many reasons. But I think a lot of them, the underlying factors, they don't want to know, because if something's wrong, it's like, it feels like their whole world's going to crash down. Like it means something about them, that they're not good
like
enough.
not a man or something.
Yeah. And it's very, very common for men to feel that way. And I'm not saying like you're not going to feel that way. I mean, probably every man has probably felt that way. Just like a lot of women feel like, you know, if they can't have a baby, that there's something wrong with them or whatever. And it's not true, but it's a common, you know, feeling. Like no feeling is wrong or bad. I'm just saying it might help through your journey to have that perspective and maybe try it on for size or do some processing to see like, how does it feel if I disconnect that part of myself from like, it's not me, it's my body. And how do I see my body with compassion? And how do we take steps to do that? Because like I said, I feel like it's one of the biggest obstacles I see in practice too, is women want their husbands or their partners to get tested, and either they're resistant to it, or if something shows up, they sort of have a really hard time and they shut down, or they get defensive, or they get angry, or they like don't want to look at it, or they're ignoring it. It's like everyone has their different defense mechanisms around insecurity or whatever. And it's like, it's just a little thing to
and it's
nudge
same
and
thing for
encourage.
women too. I think it's like we can carry a lot of shame too, that like our bodies aren't doing something, we're not ovulating, we're not or especially when it comes to a miscarriage, it can really feel like, oh, it's our fault, or my body is failing me, it's done this thing, or I failed, or whatever. And it's just it can be helpful to think, well, these are not perfect systems, and we can do the best we can to improve them, and just like have that motivation and you know, drop the ego, stay open-minded. In the end, what's more important, you know, like maintaining your ego that you have a good sperm count, or being able to build a family that you have for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Or
you have
affecting your relationship, because I see it
yes.
affect relationships when, again, and this is a great time when you're investigating your fertility, if things come up, to do inner work. We've talked about this a lot on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of it, obviously, because it's what got my husband and I through our infertility journey. But I just really recommend people to do that. And I would say men are more resistant than women as a general rule, but to start to process what does come up for you, because this can bring up a lot of like deep stuff and wounds and all sorts of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thank you so much for laying all of that out. And the show notes are going to be packed full of resources for you guys, because there's a lot of like other male fertility, sperm, or testosterone based episodes that we have that you can listen to. And if you're on this path, also free guides on Dr. Leah's website, and also some websites that we've referred or alluded to, like the legacy sperm analysis or semen analysis, you can get at home and use the code, et cetera, et cetera. So be sure to check those out. And thank you for everything that you know about this, because again, it's only going to become more and more of an issue in time.
Yes, I wish it was different, but yes, of course. I hope this is helpful, and thank you.
Bye.
Do you have your heart set on starting a family and are eagerly preparing to begin trying within the year? Have you been actively trying to conceive for several months? Do you have a burning desire to optimize your chances of conception and avoid the distressing path of infertility? Or have you been navigating infertility for a while, yet you yearn for new solutions, a supportive environment, and an approach that addresses the root causes of infertility? Our current fertility system is broken. Many couples receive almost zero support on optimizing their health and improving their chances of conceiving before or while trying to have a baby. 1 in 7 couples end up trying for over a year and then are often shuttled into the medication or reproductive technologies route like IVF. Although there is a time and a place for these tools, so many couples would have different outcomes if they had the education, resources, and support I provide in my Fertility Formula program. This program is a step-by-step, doctor-designed, holistic fertility solution for the couple who wants to conceive optimally. And it includes everything a couple needs to know with all of the resources I've created over many years seeing patients in practice. From mastering the cycle to boosting egg and sperm quality, balancing hormones, investigating female and male fertility, having access to order your own labs, both hormones and functional medicine labs, nourishing the body with eating and managing that whole aspect, fostering fertility energy, ditching toxins, reducing stress, rebalancing the gut and vaginal microbiomes, and detoxing prior to pregnancy. This program has it all. On top of that, it includes the bonus modules of breaking up with birth control, optimizing IVF if that ever becomes needed, and my pregnancy loss guide. This is the holistic information and step-by-step guidance you aren't getting from your regular doctor that will only improve your chances of conception and the health of your future baby, no matter where you are along your fertility journey, or no matter what support you might need, whether that's getting pregnant naturally or going through IUI or IVF. Visit www.womanhoodwellness.com/fertilityformula and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 15% off the entire program. Again, that's www.womanhoodwellness.com/fertilityformula and use code HEALTHYMOTHER to save 15%.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Healthy as a Mother podcast. In order for others to hear this information, please leave a review with Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and send to a friend who could benefit from this content. We're so excited to share more on becoming and being a mother next time.
And please remember that the ideas and views of this podcast are for informational purposes only and are not intended to serve as a substitute for medical care of any kind, including the diagnosis or treatment of any illness or disease. Consult with your provider before integrating this information into your own care plan. And remember, a healthier future starts now, and it starts with you.